5 million people in that province are Muslim. And there are jihadist groups in that province who do not call it Xinjiang, and they do not call it a part of China. They call it East Turkmenistan. Remember, the Turks converted to Islam a long, long time ago. So we all share a common problem. We should be working together. And would that alienate the Shiites? You bet. For us to be working with Iran and Saddam Hussein would alienate Saudi Arabia and its allies. We just have to live with that, and we have to win them over anyway, because the king of Saudi Arabia finally recognizes that these people want to behead him.
Howard, hypothetically, what would happen if ISIS joined forces with Russia?
Well, that would be Russia would be insane to allow that to happen, because that would give a rallying point to its Islamist forces in Chechnya, in Dagestan, in Kyrgyzstan, or Kyrgyzstan, Baluchistan, a whole bunch of these Russian provinces. That's suicide. Just as Turkey right now not doing anything and going into a panic over its foreign policy and not doing anything about the Islamic State, that's suicide for them. There's an old phrase from the Second World War. And it was created in the face of Adolf Hitler. It was negotiating with the cannibal to make sure he eats you last. That's what the Turks are doing right now. They're hoping that by not attacking ISIS, ISIS will not attack it. I got news for you. Turkey is on ISIS hit list, and the border is wide, wide open for ISIS to make advances.
ISIS is actively recruiting in North America and other places around the world.
Very actively, yes.
The CIA came out last week and said, you know what? We're wrong. We only thought there were about 10,000 members of ISIS. There's actually 30,000, and I think their numbers are way off.
31,500 is the official number as of today.
So when we look at...
This is a force that's growing, Rob.
Yeah,
There's
very
a power
fast.
to victory. When you win over and over again, people identify with you. When you win over and over again, people want to be a part of you. And ISIS had a nonstop winning streak until our air power stopped it in its tracks. And that's the value of our working with air power. When President Obama, with whom I disagree about many, many things, talked about degrading the Islamic State until we can eventually extinguish it, he knew what he was talking about. He's been doing that with al-Qaeda for a long time. He managed to get Osama bin Laden. George Bush, with two wars that cost $3 trillion, never touched Osama bin Laden. So this president knows what it's like to compromise a jihadist force. He's done it in Somalia. He's doing it right now in Yemen. But we should be engaging the Russians as well. But why do we have to engage the Russians? Primarily because we have to make friends with Bashar Assad.
I understand that it was President Obama who was able to finally get rid of bin Laden. I understand that, and I highly respect him for that. But is President Obama capable of taking on ISIS?
Well, he doesn't have the kind of ferocity that you and I would like, but he does seem to have the tenacity. He did those 160 airstrikes before. He did them secretly, which I don't approve of. I think that these things should be public. And I think that he can show tenacity. We will have to see. I mean, he's had a very hard time accepting the fact that jihadism has anything to do with Islam, that it's the bad face of Islam. Most religions have a good and a bad face.
Sure.
But this bad face is a little worse than most. And but he has to fess up to that. He has to own up to that. And we don't know if he's going to be able to do that. But one way or the other, he's doing the right things. He's using modern war, a new form of war, a newly invented form of war. For example, Breaking Defense, a leading defense publication, points out that we have, the Osprey, the tilt rotor craft.
Yep.
When it's on the ground, it looks like a helicopter, and the propellers are horizontal, and then when it's in the air, it flips its wings so that its propellers look like an airplane and it can fly someplace. We have entire Marine units that are trained to work with the Osprey, and they can be dropped into a territory very, very fast because the Osprey can land just about anywhere. They can do their mission in the middle of the night, and they can get out again, like the SEAL teams that got Osama bin Laden. And one of the questions in the military community right now is, should we use these tilt rotor Marine teams to make penetrations into Raqqa? Raqqa is in Syria, and it is the capital of ISIS right now. Well, of course we should. If we can plan them well, if we can plan a way to get out, if we can locate some headquarters that has a bunch of these Islamic State warriors in it, then by all means, if we can find a command and control post and we can take that out, yes, use these forces. But this is a new kind of war. This is techno-guerrilla warfare. And it's time for us to go back to what gave us our independence in the first place in the American Revolution, guerrilla tactics using high tech. And that's what Obama is basically using.
All the news reports and the briefings that you hear from Washington are all saying that this is going to be a conflict that is going to last years, like President Obama is going to be leaving this for his predecessor. When you look
that's a necessity. That's an absolute necessity, Rob.
When you look at who the predecessors could be, who do you think would be better to hold the ball that's being dropped in their hands, Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton?
Hillary Clinton is considered a hawk. Hillary Clinton has had to forge a persona as a tough lady, as one of the Iron Ladies. And Hillary Clinton would be better. But then there's another candidate, that's the Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts. She is extremely appealing. On the one hand, now remember, I'm pro-Israel, and she is very pro-Israel, but at the same time, she's pro-human beings. She's pro-getting rid of this radical divide between the 1% and the 99%.
But she doesn't have the experience that Hillary Clinton has.
No, Hillary Clinton knows her stuff.
Yeah.
She's been all over the world. She's met every major leader.
Plus, she's got Bill.
Yeah, and she's got Bill, and that's
two for the price of one. Stand
and
by,
her daughter.
That's right. Chelsea, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Howard Bloom is with us. He's the author of The Muhammad Code, which I call the Rosetta Stone of what's going on in the Middle East today. It's available at Amazon.com, and Howard's website is www.howardbloom.net. I'll be back after the news. Don't go away. Hi, this is Rob McConnell, just letting you know that the X-Chronicles newspaper is now available online at www.xzonebookclub.com. All past editions and current editions of the X-Chronicles newspaper are available for 99 cents. That's www.xzonebookclub.com, and that's 99 cents U.S. per edition. And don't forget, the X-Zone store is now open as well for all of your X-Zone Nation merchandise. www.thexzonestore.com.
Do you have a dis-ease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, aguidinglight, spelled LITE.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Explanation. Howard Bloom is our guest, www.howardbloom.net. He's the author of The Muhammad Code, and it's available at Amazon.com. You know, before we were talking about the 160-some-odd airstrikes that were authorized so far by President Obama. What do you think the effect of the airstrikes that have been authorized in Syria is going to be?
Well, that's why we need Bashar Assad on our side, because the forces that we could be supporting with our airstrikes are no longer the Peshmerga, the Kurds, and they're no longer the Iraqi forces. The ground forces are Bashar Assad's forces. Now, if we start making airstrikes on Syria, then Bashar Assad is going to go to the Russians. The Russians are already very sensitive to this. And the Russians, it's up to the Russians to decide how they will respond. And they could respond very, very belligerently. This could be a casus belli. It could be the trigger point for another world war. And that's not what we want to happen. So we have got to stop. We have got to recognize that dictators have a place in the Middle East. They provide more freedoms than the alternative, which is chaos and ultimately jihadists. And we have to work with the one dictator that's left, Bashar Assad.
All right, so we've got the airstrikes that have been authorized in Syria. We've got Secretary Kerry trying to get as many allies as possible to make this coalition. Why don't we just put boots on the ground, get it done and over with, bang?
Well, there's a lesson to be learned from our Afghanistan war and from our Iraq war. Having boots on the ground was a big mistake. It produced chaos. Basically, we cleared the way for the Islamic State. We did it in 2 countries. You know who's going to take over in Afghanistan when we are finally out of there. It's going to be the Taliban, which is another jihadist group. You know who was taken over. The Islamic State has taken over 40% of Iraq at this point and 25% of Syria. It is probably bigger than small states like Libya at this point, and it has that $3 million a day in cash income that we were talking about. We cannot make the same mistake we've already made. We need to try this techno-empowered guerrilla warfare. It's the kind of warfare that Muhammad himself would have approved of. He felt it was better to have one man who was very intent on doing things and willing to live and die for his cause than to have 1,000 men who were indifferent. He felt that ambush was the way to go, catch them by surprise. Well, we have the surveillance equipment to constantly catch the Islamic State by surprise. In fact, going back to Breaking Defense, the magazine, it claims that we now have a sensor system and processing system in each of our aircraft that can make that aircraft independent of intelligence, ground intelligence. It doesn't need to get intelligence about where to strike from somebody else. Its sensors can pick up targets on its own as it's flying and take them out. Now, I'd like to see more information about that because it sounds like a great way to take out civilians, because how do you tell the difference between a jihadi and a civilian? I don't know the details enough, but it is time to use all of these techno tricks in a new form of guerrilla warfare. Special forces and SEAL teams are much more effective than 130,000 to 300,000 soldiers on the ground.
We were talking during the commercial break, and apparently there's a connection between ISIS and the upcoming referendum of secession from Scotland, from the United Kingdom.
Well, here's the connection. The whole movement for secession for Scotland is based on an assumption, and that assumption is the world is going to be stable, and Scotland will never be attacked, and Scotland doesn't have to worry about a thing. It can defend itself. Well, there's a reason that big nation-states have come to dominate in the 20th and 21st century. Big nation-states like China with 1.2 billion people, India with 1 billion people, the United States with 315 million people or so. And that is, size matters, especially when it comes to hierarchical showdowns, pecking order showdowns in the pecking order of nations, like the one we're having right now with jihadism. Once upon a time, in the days when Islamic Jihad was very big in the world and the Europeans were afraid that at any moment Christendom was about to be extinguished, those are the days of William Shakespeare when that fear was prevalent. Those are the days of Martin Luther when those fears were prevalent. The ships of the Islamic naval jihad used to make it up to England, and they would pounce on a village in the middle of the night, kill the men, take the women and children as sex slaves, go down and sell them in the slave markets of Algiers. That happened on a fairly regular basis. The forces of Islamic Jihad took big pieces of Italy, and ISIS, the Islamic State, has mapped out its intentions for the next 5 years. And that 5-year plan includes taking the entire northern third of Africa, all of Spain, which the Muslims had as their own possession for 800 years. We tend to forget that. And to take pieces of Greece, of Italy and other